Hello. Wanna play? No? What are you doing? Can I join in?
Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, hi, my name's Claire and this is Yoli. I make videos all about houseplant care, sharing tips and tricks I've learned over the years to help keep your plants happy and healthy. And in today's video, we're going to be talking all about pests and houseplants. Unfortunately, if you do have lots of plants, pests are just something you're probably going to have to deal with from time to time. I know they are a pain, but it happens to all of us. It's nothing to feel bad about, especially at this time of year. In the last month, I've dealt with spider mites, thrips, mealybugs, aphids, and fungus gnats. So yeah, I'm going to take you through all the ways that I've managed to kind of keep them at bay, prevent them from coming back, treat them when they're at their worst. And yeah, I hope you find it useful. Let's get into it. So it's important to say straight away, with pretty much all of the pest treatments I'm going to be talking about in this video, sometimes doing one treatment on a plant isn't enough to completely wipe out the infestation, even if you think you have at first. And believe me, I am talking from experience here. There have been so many times where I've treated a plant, it's looked absolutely fine for a week, a couple of weeks, and then I thought, it'll be all right. And I've moved it back in with the rest of my plants, and before you know it, it has spread. So just accept the fact that sometimes, although it's annoying, you might have to do several treatments in order to completely wipe out the infestation. There's a few things that I personally always have in the house all year round, just in the event that an infestation breaks out, because with these things, pretty much with all of these things, you can treat more or less any pests. The first one is hydrogen peroxide. I'll talk about all of these in more detail as we get into individual pest treatments. But yeah, hydrogen peroxide, it's good for so many things, from root rot to pest treatment to antifungal treatment to all sorts. The next one you've probably heard of, it's Neem Oil. And this stuff, although I don't use it a lot to actually treat pests, I know some people do, I haven't had much luck with that, but I use it as a pest preventative a lot of the time, and it's just great. The next one is super important. This is a systemic bug killer, and I use a brand called Provanto. I'll link all of these products in the description box below, by the way. But this one's called Provanto, and basically a systemic bug killer just gets right into the cells of your plant when you treat it. It means that a lot of stuff, aka pests, that feed off it will die when they eat your plant. So that is a very, very, very good thing to have. And lastly, rubbing alcohol. Again, this is amazing for certain types of pests, and I have it in the house always because it's brilliant. And lastly, this is one that's a little bit random, but definitely worth having. Makeup brushes. I use them all the time for pest treatments. Again, I'll show you some examples when we get into the video, but they're just amazing at getting into all the little cracks and crevices of your plants that you might not be able to reach otherwise. So yeah, if you're looking to compile a little pest prevention shopping list, those are the things that I would highly recommend getting. I also just want to say that I'm by no means an expert. I am just taking all of what I'm going to say in this video from my personal experience. I have dealt with pests a lot over the years, and these are the methods that have worked the best for me. I know some people do it differently, and that's it. Disclaimer done. So the first one that we're going to talk about is thrips, and I'm going to use my Anthurium clarinervium as an example for this, because this one, this time last year, suffered really badly with thrips. You can still see the damage on some of her leaves and on the backs of the leaves as well. And basically, the most important thing to remember with thrips is that firstly, they can fly, so they can get very easily from plant to plant. And secondly, that they can reproduce asexually, which pretty much just means you only need one for an infestation to start. So if you notice even one thrip, then I would recommend isolating that plant pretty much immediately and keeping a very close eye on the ones around it. Young thrips as well tend to be very pale and sometimes a lot harder to spot than the adults that are much darker. So often, if you just kind of suspect that something's not right, the signs to look for are stickiness on the leaves and discoloration, like you can see in patches here. But yes, stickiness, particularly on the backs of the leaves, is definitely something to look out for. The best method I've found to get rid of thrips is firstly to wash down and wipe all areas of your plant, both sides of the leaves and stems. It's super important to get into all the little crevices of your plant, so using a paintbrush or a makeup brush is a really effective way to help with this, to target any hard to reach areas. Let your plant dry off and then thoroughly spray it with a systemic bug killer such as Provanto. Again, be sure to spray all of the plant and not just the face of the leaves. It's a good idea to keep your plant isolated away from other plants for at least a few weeks after treatment, so that you can monitor it and make sure that if anything comes back, you can deal with it immediately. If you don't have a space to isolate it, using a clear plastic bag to seal it in like this is a really good idea. As a precautionary measure, or if the infestation's particularly bad, you can also use blue and yellow sticky traps to catch any potential runaway thrips. When you do integrate your plant back into the rest of your collection, using a diluted neem oil spray every few weeks to mist your plant, along with regular pest checking, can be a really good way to stop them from coming back. I know I've used my Anthurium clarinervium as an example, and they don't particularly like their leaves to get wet, but at the end of the day, when it's down to that or pests, then they're just gonna have to deal with it, because otherwise it's gonna just completely wipe your plant out. But yeah, as I say, mine has been thrip free for almost a year now, and she's looking really healthy, and I've since dealt with thrips on other plants, and that has personally been the best method I've found to get rid of them. The second really common houseplant pest, and one that I have battled with a lot over the years, is spider mites. Up until recently, my big Alocasia portadora here was really badly affected. Touch wood, it's been a good few months now, and I've taken the risk and I've put her back in with the rest of my plants, because I did several treatments and I haven't seen any sign of them anymore. But in my opinion, spider mites they're the ones that I hate the most, just because in my experience, a systemic pest control doesn't really work with them. I will go through in a second the best way that I found to get rid of them, but you do have to do several treatments. Like at first with this plant, I gave her one treatment and then I treated her again a week later. She looked absolutely fine. It'd been about 4 weeks. I moved her back in with the rest, and then all of a sudden the spider mites were back. So yeah, it was quite a while before I actually managed to fully get rid of them and get her back in with the rest of my collection. But the common signs to look with spider mites, because they are so teeny tiny, like they're microscopic and you don't always see the actual mites themselves, is if you look underneath the leaves, for some reason it always tends to happen on the underneath first, and you look for any patches of discoloration, any webbing, anything like that. I'll put some clips in of the damage on this one, because it is quite easy to spot, and usually if it's been around other plants, because spider mites don't fly, they just crawl, but if it's been close to other plants, then it is unfortunately very likely that if you don't act quickly, your other plants will also be infested. I know a really hot topic in the plant community at the moment is predatory mites. I know loads of people are using them, particularly for spider mites, and I did try them recently, and to be completely honest, I didn't have the best experience. I followed all the instructions, I used loads of sachets, and to be honest, they didn't really seem to do anything, and at the time that they run out, the spider mites were still there. So for me, I personally don't think I'll be using them again, but as I say, lots of people are having success with them. The best method I've found for spider mites is mixing rubbing alcohol with a blob of washing up liquid, neem oil and water. To be honest, I mainly free pour nowadays, but the ratio should roughly be 2 parts alcohol to 1 part water. Again, I use a makeup brush to apply it, just because it can get into all the little crevices where the spider mites lay their eggs that can often be missed if you just wipe the leaves down. Try to really work the brush into any little gaps. Alcohol kills on contact, so the more vigilant and thorough you can be, the less you'll have to repeat this process. It's really important to do both sides of the leaves as well, as, like I said, they tend to set up camp and breed on the underside of the leaves. As I say, even with this treatment, although it kind of appears to get rid of the infestation pretty much instantly, I would recommend doing this at least a few times a week for a good few weeks before you risk putting your plant back in with your collection, just because, as I know from experience, sometimes everything can look to be fine and then all of a sudden, almost overnight, it's not. The other important thing to remember with spider mites is that very often they thrive in a warm, dry climate. So quite often, misting your plants, you can use a diluted neem oil spray, but often just cranking up the humidity can be enough to keep them at bay. The next pest that I have dealt with very recently is mealybugs, and I had an absolute nightmare. So this is the plant that I found them on, and this plant, it's a Philodendron Splendid, was in my cabinet there, and I noticed mealybugs in this plant the day before I went on holiday. So I was like, oh my goodness, not only this plant, but all of the plants that it's been in the cabinet with. And it was the first time I'd ever had mealybugs as well. So this was a bit of a nightmare. And as I say, this was actually only a few weeks ago. And I know when I spoke about this in one of my other videos, somebody said 3 weeks is not enough to declare a mealybug infestation over. And I totally agree. I totally agree. I'm not saying that this plant is pest free. I'm saying that for the last 3 weeks, I haven't noticed signs of them again, and I'm keeping it under very close observation. But I did a lot of research. I spoke to a lot of my friends in the plant community about the best way to deal with mealybugs. Mealybugs love a warm and moist environment, so I think I probably created a pretty perfect breeding ground for them in my cabinet. And although apparently the female ones don't fly, the male ones can, although it's more common for them to travel between plants through crawling. So if you've got lots of plants quite close to each other, then the risk of them spreading is fairly high. So again, this was major stress with everything in my cabinet. Mealybugs, from what I've heard and experienced so far, compared to some others, tend to be slightly easier to treat. Just dip a paintbrush or makeup brush into pure rubbing alcohol and directly coat any of the pests you can see with that. It's also a good idea to use the alcohol washing up liquid mix I spoke about just now to give all areas of your plant a thorough rub down, again working the brush into any crevices. Afterwards, use a systemic bug killer to spray all areas of the plant and continue to keep the plant isolated for at least a few weeks before reintroducing it to the rest of your collection. I know it was only a few weeks ago that I treated this plant, and I did actually decide to treat all of the plants in my cabinet with Provanto as well, the systemic bug killer, and touch wood, so far I haven't seen any more signs, but I'm keeping it under very, very close supervision. And also in regards to mealybugs in the soil, because that's something that I've actually personally never experienced, but again, I have spoken to multiple friends in the plant community that have, and supposedly the best way to treat this is firstly to repot your plants. Obviously don't keep the old soil, don't even compost it, because then you risk it spreading to outdoor plants. Just bin it, get it far away from your plants, and then soak your plant's roots in a 1:3 ratio of hydrogen peroxide, very similarly to how you do for root rot. As I say, I have made a full video on hydrogen peroxide that I will link up there and in the description box below. But yeah, even after that, treating your plant with a systemic pest treatment and keeping it isolated, continuing to monitor it, that seems to be the general consensus on that one. Another pest that I've dealt with a lot so far this summer is aphids. Aphids are basically little green insects or flies. They don't actually always fly, some have wings, some don't, but they feed off the sap of your plants, and oh my goodness, they are such a nightmare. And if you guys have watched my other videos, then you'll know that I'm currently living back at my mum's house. I'm living back at home for the time being, and part of the reason my battle has continued for so long is because my mum's got a lot of outdoor plants that she's growing, like pepper plants and stuff like that, and she takes them outside during the day and then she brings them back inside to this room where the majority of my plants are. So it's been a bit of a nightmare. I've had to treat all of her plants, I've had to treat all of my plants as well, a lot of them anyway, and it's just a bit of an ongoing battle. Take your plant outside if possible, or far away from your other plants, and squash all the aphids you can see, and then thoroughly shower the plant down, getting into all the crevices. Again, using a fine paintbrush or makeup brush is a really good way to get into any hard to reach areas. Be aware as well, aphids often tend to appear on younger leaves or new unfurling leaves at first, so it's really important to target absolutely everywhere. Afterwards, spray your plant down with a systemic bug killer, being sure to spray all areas of the plant. Continue to keep it isolated for a few weeks and use a diluted neem oil spray as a precautionary measure to help prevent them from coming back. As I say, this has been slightly ongoing for me, but I have also dealt with aphids before when I haven't been living back at home, and this has been the most effective way to get rid of them. And the last one that I'm going to talk about in this video that I feel like a lot of us can probably relate to is fungus gnats. Fungus gnats are an absolute pain. They just fly around your plants. They lay their eggs in damp soil. So actually the best, probably the most effective way of making sure you never get fungus gnats is by switching to either complete hydroponics or a semi-hydroponic substrate such as PON. PON is just absolutely brilliant because it means that they can't lay their eggs in there. There's nothing for them to breed in. And it's also a substrate that just tends to keep your plants really, really happy. If, however, like me, you do keep a lot of your plants in soil, then the best possible thing that I found is hydrogen peroxide for fungus gnats. It is absolutely amazing. I did make a full video on this along with how to treat root rot and all that sort of stuff, but specifically focused on fungus gnats because my friend's plant had an awful infestation and we managed to get rid of them using this. Besides completely changing your substrate to something like PON, the most effective ways that I've found are repotting plants that are seriously affected in fresh soil and watering the new soil with a hydrogen peroxide and water mixture. As I say, I did make a video specifically about this, taking you through all of the steps to do this, so I will link that video in the description box below. Hydrogen peroxide is really amazing for targeting the larvae, I never know how you say it, the stuff that breeds in the soil basically, and that's the bit that can actually damage your plants. The flying little insects, they're just going to be annoying. They're not actually going to cause your plants any damage, but it's the larva that stuff that is going to be damaging to your plant's root system, and that is the thing that you need to target. In terms of actually getting rid of the flies themselves, blue and yellow sticky traps are probably the best thing, particularly just after you treat your plants with hydrogen peroxide or just after you water and you notice them all kind of flying up out of the soil. If you just place blue and yellow sticky traps all around your plants, hang them all over the room, then hopefully that should help to take out some of the adults. The other literally amazing thing to get rid of the larvae, I'm just going to call it larvae, I don't know if that's right, but the other amazing thing for that is using mosquito bits. You literally just sprinkle that on your soil and it helps to attack and get rid of any of the larvae so that they can't develop into bigger flies. If you do decide to use this in combination with hydrogen peroxide, then it's a good idea to wait a couple of days after using the hydrogen peroxide before you add the mosquito bits. I'm personally not using mosquito bits at the moment. I have used them in the past and got on really well with them, but for me, hydrogen peroxide is just literally, it's the best thing. So I'm just using that at the moment. And what I do as well occasionally is if I notice an outbreak starting to happen in a pot, after I've watered it through, then I will just take a sprayer and I will just spray pure hydrogen peroxide onto the top of the soil. And yeah, touch wood, that is really, really helping. And I've got a lot of plants. So yeah, I really, really hope that this video was useful. If there's anything that I didn't cover or I rushed over or you've got any questions about anything, then drop me a comment down below and I will try and help. If there's any other pests as well, like whitefly, blackfly, scale, anything like that you've got any questions on, again, leave me a comment down below. But I really, really hope you found this video useful. If you did, please make sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, have a lovely day, and I will see you in the next video.